Spring 1943. Europe is bleeding, and the war's balance teeters on a knife edge. The Allies have won in North Africa. Rommel's tanks are burning under the desert sun. But the next move will decide everything. To break into Hitler's fortress Europe, they need a foothold. Sicily, the gateway to the Mediterranean, is the obvious choice. And that's exactly the problem. Everyone knows it, including Hitler, his generals, his spies, his analysts. All eyes are fixed on that rocky island just south of Italy. If the Allies invade there, German forces will be waiting. Inside London's secret war rooms, maps of Europe glow under dim lamps. Lines of red string trace naval routes and arrows across the sea. The air smells of cigarettes, damp uniforms, and fear disguised as determination. A handful of British officers are gathered around a table at the Admiralty. Among them, Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montague, a barrister turned spy, and Charles Cholmondeley, a peculiar intelligence officer with the kind of eccentric mind that thrives in chaos. They've been tasked with the impossible: convince Hitler that the Allied invasion will strike somewhere else. How? Someone asks. Do we make the enemy believe what we need them to believe? The room goes silent. Then Montague says something half in jest. The kind of idea that sounds insane before it sounds brilliant. What if, he says slowly, we let them find proof? He leans over the table, his eyes narrowing. A body, carrying documents. The others stare. A dead man as a courier of lies? But the more they think about it, the less absurd it becomes. The plan begins to take shape in whispers. A body, dressed as a Royal Marine officer, washed ashore with top-secret papers, suggesting that the Allies will invade Greece and Sardinia, not Sicily. If the Germans intercept it, and if they believe it, they'll divert their forces, leaving the real target exposed. One deception could change the war. By midnight, Montague drafts a memo labeled Operation Mincemeat, a code name that sounds almost like a joke, but carries the weight of thousands of lives. The following weeks are filled with quiet, ruthless preparation. They need a body, one that no one will miss. They need documents, perfect in every detail. They need timing, so that when the tide carries this man ashore, everything looks like a tragic accident of war. As dawn breaks over London, the streets outside are still covered in the dust of the Blitz. People hurry to work, unaware that somewhere beneath Whitehall, men in dark suits are plotting to fight Hitler, not with bullets, but with imagination. A war of flesh and steel is about to meet a war of minds. The idea was brilliant and horrifying. If the Allies wanted Hitler to believe the invasion was aimed at Greece, they needed a messenger, but not a living one. Somewhere in a cold corner of London, a new kind of soldier was about to be born. One who would never breathe, never march, but might help win the war. MI5 needed a body. Not just any corpse, but one that could pass for a drowned British officer. A man whose story would look real enough to deceive the Abwehr, German military intelligence. That's when they found Glyndwr Michael. He was nobody. A homeless Welshman who had died after ingesting rat poison in an abandoned warehouse. No family, no records. In death, he became the perfect ghost. British pathologists examined the body carefully. The cause of death was adjusted in the files: drowned at sea. His new identity was forged in the quiet rooms of MI5, Major William Martin, Royal Marines. But a name wasn't enough. To make the illusion perfect, the man needed a life, habits, memories, love. That was Montague's genius. He and his team began crafting a personality from thin air. They filled the man's pockets with a theater ticket stub, a letter from his fiancée Pam, a photograph of a smiling woman holding a small dog, receipts, a used pencil, even a silver cross. Small, unimportant details that, together whispered, this man existed. The documents in his briefcase were the true weapon, letters between British generals proving that the Allies would strike Greece and Sardinia. Each word was crafted with surgical precision, authentic letterheads, signatures, and casual references to make the deception irresistible. They even included a slight misprint, a deliberate human flaw, because perfection can be suspicious. Montague called it the fine art of lying in plain sight. The dead man's story became so complete that the intelligence officers began referring to him as if he were real. They toasted him at lunch, joked about his transfer to active service. It was easier that way, to laugh rather than think about what they were really doing. Weeks later, in a sealed steel canister marked "Handle with Care, Optical Instruments," Major Martin was placed on ice. His uniform was pressed. His briefcase was chained to his wrist. Inside lay the letter that could turn Hitler's armies in the wrong direction. In the next phase of the plan, the corpse would be released near the coast of Spain, a neutral country crawling with German spies. If luck was on their side, the body would be found, the papers examined, and the greatest act of deception in modern warfare would begin. Somewhere beneath London, Montague closed the last folder of the operation and exhaled. He had given a dead man a story and sent him to war. The operation moved from London's war rooms to the steel belly of the HMS Seraph, a British submarine patrolling the Atlantic. Her crew had been told almost nothing, only that they were carrying something vital to the outcome of the war. It was April 1943. The sea was cold, the waves heavy and metallic under a starless sky. Inside the sub, the air was damp and still. Every sound, the hiss of pipes, the clank of metal, echoed like a heartbeat in a coffin. Captain Bill Jewell stood over a long sealed container marked "Handle with Care, Optical Instruments." He knew what was inside. He also knew he couldn't tell his men. If anyone asked, the answer was always the same: you don't want to know. When HMS Seraph surfaced near the Spanish coast, the crew emerged into darkness. The coastline of Huelva was faint, just a shadow line between sea and sky. Spain was neutral, but its harbors swarmed with German agents. Everything had to look like a tragic accident, not a military drop. At 4:30 a.m., the hatch opened. The sea sprayed cold salt against their faces. Jewell gave the order quietly: "Prepare the package." Two sailors lifted the canister onto the deck. Inside, on a bed of dry ice, lay the man who would change history, Major William Martin. His uniform was crisp. His hair was combed. The leather briefcase was chained to his wrist, heavy with fake secrets. They wrapped him in his life jacket, attached the chain, and added a few personal touches. A photo of Pam, the woman who never existed, folded neatly in his pocket. Then, without ceremony, they carried him to the edge. The night was so silent that even the sound of the sea seemed hesitant. The men hesitated too. None of them spoke. There was something sacred and deeply wrong about what they were about to do. Captain Jewell finally whispered, "May God receive your soul, whoever you are." Then the body slid into the water with a soft splash, vanishing into the black waves. For a moment, The ripples shimmered in the moonlight, and then were gone. The submarine stayed surfaced for a few minutes longer. They waited, watching the current carry the officer slowly toward the Spanish coast. If all went according to plan, he would wash ashore by morning. If not, the sea would swallow him forever, and with him, the operation that never officially existed. By dawn, HMS Seraph disappeared beneath the waves, leaving behind nothing but a drifting corpse and the greatest illusion of World War II. In London, Montague and Cholmondeley waited in silence. The operation had left British waters and entered the hands of fate. On the morning of April 30th, 1943, fishermen near the Spanish port of Huelva spotted something strange drifting among the waves. A man in a Royal Marines uniform, face pale and lifeless, washed ashore as if carried by fate itself. He was quickly brought to local authorities. His briefcase was still chained to his wrist. The papers inside were soaked but intact. Spain was officially neutral, but its neutrality leaned heavily toward Berlin. Within hours, the local police had informed their superiors, and whispers spread fast. Before the day was over, a German intelligence officer named Adolf Klaus, stationed in Spain, was already on his way. He examined the body personally. The identity tags, the uniform, the letters, everything looked perfect. Even the decomposition matched a man who had drowned days earlier. The Spanish coroner's report concluded, death by drowning, no sign of violence. The documents were taken for safekeeping, and soon, unofficially, copies were sent to the German embassy in Madrid. In Berlin, the Abwehr received the news with electric excitement. A British courier lost at sea? Secret Allied plans on his wrist? It sounded too good to be true, and therefore too valuable to ignore. Colonel Karl Erich Kuhlenthal, one of Hitler's trusted intelligence officers, handled the case personally. The papers were examined, photographed, and carefully resealed to be returned to the British, just in case they ever asked. Back in London, MI5 monitored everything through coded diplomatic intercepts. They knew the Spanish had found the body. Then they knew the Germans had seen the documents. But the question, the only question that mattered, was whether Hitler believed. For 2 weeks, there was silence. Montague waited in the fog of uncertainty, unable to sleep, replaying every detail in his mind. Had they overplayed it? Had the Germans noticed something wrong? The ink, the phrasing, the chain around the wrist? Then, one morning, the signal arrived. British intelligence decoded a German message sent from Madrid to Berlin. It was short, cautious, but clear enough. The documents appeared genuine. Immediate steps being taken to reinforce Greece and Sardinia. Montague put down the message slowly. He didn't speak for a long time. The room around him felt frozen in disbelief. The dead man, the one who never lived, had done his job. But the operation wasn't over yet. The world still had to see whether the lie would survive contact with Hitler himself. In early May 1943, the false papers reached the highest desks in Berlin. They passed through coded telegrams, diplomatic pouches, and trembling hands until they landed on the desk of Adolf Hitler himself. The Führer read every line, slowly, twice. The letters, written by British generals, seemed authentic, so mundane in tone, so filled with casual military detail that they couldn't possibly be fake. One phrase sealed the illusion. "We must continue to make the enemy think the attack will come in Sicily, while our real objective is Greece." Hitler's eyes lingered on that line. He had long suspected the Mediterranean was Britain's soft underbelly. But now, this accidental confirmation from a drowned British officer made it certain. In his war diary, General Alfred Jodl later wrote, "The Führer is convinced the Allies will strike Greece and the Balkans." Within hours, German strategy began to shift. Divisions were pulled from France and Italy. New minefields were laid along the Greek coast. Tanks rolled south, away from Sicily, exactly as the Allies had hoped. From London, Ewan Montagu and Charles Cholmondeley could hardly believe what they were reading in intercepted German dispatches. The bait had been swallowed whole. They sat in their office surrounded by cigarette smoke and exhaustion, staring at the decoded messages in silence. Months of work, one corpse, a handful of forged letters. And now, entire German armies were moving because of it. Montagu later wrote, "It was as if we had taken the enemy by the hand and led him to his own disaster." And yet, even in triumph, there was an eerie stillness. The man they'd invented, Major William Martin, was being buried in Huelva with full military honors. Local priests held a ceremony. A Spanish officer saluted. No one knew that the hero in the coffin had never lived at all. For Montagu, the irony was unbearable. He sent an anonymous wreath with the words, "From his grateful countrymen." Back in Berlin, Hitler's generals were busy reinforcing the wrong beaches. The deception had worked. Operation Mincemeat, absurd, macabre, and brilliant, had changed the course of the war without a single bullet fired. But one question lingered in Montagu's mind long after victory. How far could humanity go to win a war using death as a disguise? The war moved on. Armies clashed, cities burned, and the beaches of Sicily turned red with history. But few ever knew the strange ghost that had guided it all. Major William Martin was buried in Huelva under a simple white cross that read, "Greater love hath no man than this." To the Spanish locals, he was a fallen Allied hero. To the Germans, he was proof of their own cleverness, confirmation that they had uncovered a secret. And to the men in Room 13 of British Naval Intelligence, he was a lie that had saved tens of thousands of lives. Ewan Montagu and Charles Cholmondeley returned to their quiet offices in London. No medals, no parades, just the silence of men who had done something brilliant and unspeakable. They couldn't tell their families. They couldn't tell their friends. For years, Operation Mincemeat remained sealed in classified files marked top secret, never to be released. It wasn't until the 1950s that Montagu finally told the story to the world, cautiously, leaving out the darkest details. By then, the real identity of the man who played Major Martin had almost been forgotten. Decades later, historians discovered his true name, Glyndwr Michael, a homeless man from Wales who had died alone after ingesting rat poison. A death no one would have remembered, until the British found him and gave him a new life, a new uniform, and a purpose that changed the course of the war. In a strange way, Glyndwr Michael became something he had never been in life, a soldier, a savior, a symbol. His body fooled Hitler, his story fooled the world, and in that deception he found a kind of immortality. Today, visitors still leave flowers at his grave in Huelva. The headstone now bears his true name, alongside the rank he never held. Glyndwr Michael served as Major William Martin, Royal Marines. For the men who created the illusion, Montagu, Cholmondeley, and the anonymous hands who helped, The story was more than a victory. It was proof that in war the sharpest weapon isn't a gun, a bomb, or a fleet. It's imagination. Because sometimes the most powerful truth is the one you invent.